For years, Honda had no real competition when it came to their DCT or automatic bike, and that's largely down to some patents that they had on certain elements of the system. But time has moved on and there are now other manufacturers who are getting involved in the game, KTM, Yamaha and BMW to name but three. So I thought I'd take a look at one of those in the form of this BMW R1300GS ASA. Now BMW have taken a different approach to Honda's DCT. That DCT system has two clutches, so the bike is ready and waiting for whatever gear you're changing into, either up or down. The ASA system here retains a single clutch, but it uses two electronically controlled actuators which control the clutch and gear shift mechanisms. This means it's a much more compact and lighter solution than Honda's. So is this as good or is it better?
Okay, so here we go. There is the BMW R1300GS TE ASA in trophy colours. Now normally when I get a press bike I spend as much time as I can getting to know it and then pull together a review. Because this one with the ASA is different, I wanted to give my first impressions of it. Now this only arrived yesterday. I've ridden it from my house to here, so it's not completely new to me, but I thought I'd give my first initial reaction so you can see those. So let's power the bike on. It's absolutely freezing this morning, it's about 3 degrees. So bike on, let's get it started. Hold the brake. There we go. A little bit clattery when it's cold, this engine. I wouldn't say it's necessarily noisy. It's not like a skeleton having a wank in a biscuit tin or anything like that, but it's just a little bit clattery. So anyway, ASA gearbox, so it's an automatic gearbox. You have the manual option as well. I'm used to riding these sort of gearboxes because I ride DCT Africa Twin. This is slightly different. There's no hand controls in terms of changing gear. It's done with a traditional shifter at the bottom. So to put it into gear, hold the brake in, push it down into first. We've now got first manual. If I press this little button, that puts it into drive, which is fully auto, and I'll start with that. And then it is just a twist and go. Here we go. Okay, seem to engage first gear okay there. Got to be careful because it is still a bit icy in places this morning. So first things first, feels pretty smooth, very similar to the Africa Twin in that sense. I'm not going to make this a direct comparison, but that's my benchmark. That's what I've been riding for a very long time and I know the system very well. Got a pretty nice soft throttle off the bottom, not snatchy. Change down to second gear there quite nicely. So far indeed there, that seems to, slow manoeuvres, wasn't clunky on the downshift particularly. And it's getting through the gears at a pretty decent pace. I noticed on the Africa Twin, if you're in just standard drive mode, then it very quickly races up the gearbox. This not quite the same, but you have only got drive and manual, whereas the Africa Twin you've got a drive mode and you've then got 3 sports modes that you can choose from to find the optimal sort of riding pattern, if you like, in terms of how long it holds on to gears and all that sort of stuff. With this you've just got drive and manual. Not a bad thing at all, just something worth pointing out. But the initial response is pretty good. The one thing I will notice though is when it changes gear, there's a definite clunk, and the bike sort of does this, it lurches. One of the good things about the DCT system in the Honda is you don't have that. It's a much smoother element. It takes away that risk of, when you're riding with the pillion, of clashing helmets where you're making gear changes. This one as there's a bit of hesitancy. If I was to change down a gear, I can still change down gears manually, but it keeps it in drive. So in theory then should, if I go down to, see, they're much smoother, those downshifts with the lever. I'm not getting the kind of clunk and hesitancy that I'm getting with the manual shifts, but it should now still go back to, there we go, changing back. It's not horrendous, just a bit like kind of being heavy-handed with the clutch when you're riding. There's a part of my brain saying don't say it, 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 don't say it. But in pure drive mode, on first impressions, it's not as smooth as the Africa Twin in terms of gear changes. I was to give it a little bit more of a handful. It did drop down a gear, dropped down one gear, and there was a clunk. Yeah, drive mode's just not quite as snappy and responsive as I thought it would be, but it's good. It's you know, it's not something I would say, well, it's so bad I could never live with this. Not by any means. Coming from a Honda DCT system, it feels pretty similar. Not having the hand shifts, I've kind of got used to that. I have got a foot shifter on my bike, which I use from time to time when I'm riding it in pure manual mode. But a lot of times a quick flicker, you get used to using these, and yeah, I think if you're coming to this, having the foot shifter is much easier. Yeah, I mean that's fine. It's not a problem at all. If I press that button there to get it into manual, I've now got the foot shift, and that's pretty smooth. That's just like riding a manual version of this bike with a quick shifter. It's exactly how it feels, you just haven't got that clutch, and that's the bit that's going to be weird. Then the question is, I suppose, whether this becomes, you know, a widely adopted system. I know, looking at the Hondas, so for example Africa Twins, more than 60%, approaching 70% of Africa Twins that they sell now are the DCTs. I'm wondering if the inclusion of it on a bike like this will see those sales pick up on the ASA model. I know people are very hesitant about it, and I think this is probably a softer way in than maybe the Honda version, because you're essentially riding a bike with a quick shifter and no clutch, whereas the Honda's probably intentionally more used in that full auto mode, I would guess. I don't know. I tend to use it like that. I'll use it in manual mode off-road, and I'll use it in manual mode if I'm kind of just playing around. But 9 times out of 10 I put it in Sport 2 and just ride it on that and leave it at that. Obviously it's not a system that's going to be for everybody, and there will be some hesitancy. If I now push that into drive, there we go, we're back into drive mode. Let's see how this handles. Yeah, I found that, you know, out and about touring, it just makes things, you know, a much simpler, much more relaxed. You soon get into the swing of it. I don't think it takes anything away from the bike. The only caveat would be, I guess, is, you know, riding off-road or in areas where you want to be able to slip the clutch, and I think that's more probably off-road than it is on-road, because a lot of the times you're slipping the clutch to control the power or that feed in, and you can control that largely with the rear brake on the DCT bikes for sure, and you can give you that kind of fake clutch slip with that. It's off-road where you might want to sort of cut the power, because the problem is that the throttle is permanently live, so, you know, I can't blip the throttle without it having an impact. I can't do that. And by the same token, if you find yourself getting into trouble, you can grab the clutch, and that takes this out. So if you're wrestling with the bars, pulling the clutch in means you're not putting any input through that wrist, and you can't do that on this, and you can't do that on the Honda, you can't do that on any of those bikes that are using this system. And on the road I don't think that's really a problem. The only time I've ever had that problem is when I first got the Africa Twin DCT and I did a U-turn in a tight lane, didn't put it into neutral, and as I turned the bars to turn it, I gave it a bit of gas and the bike shot forward into the hedge. And you only do that once and then you go, no, click, neutral. And that actually is something that is a little bit different on this bike. I'll show you. On the Africa Twin, you've got a neutral button essentially. You can click it into neutral. This is not the same. So if I was to stop here, okay, so now if I want to put this into neutral, it's not just a press of a button. Hold the brake, push down on the gear lever, we're in neutral. Not quite as instant as hitting a button. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it's just a different solution. Again, hold the brake, down into first, it puts you straight away into the manual mode. So let's pull away on that one. And incidentally, if there's any Prodigy fans, the late great Keith Flint used to live just down there, literally a quarter of a mile away. Okay, let's see what manual mode does there. Yeah, it doesn't stall, it does change down for you. Having ridden previously on this bike, what was it, a mile to where our starting point was, I wanted just to give you a flavour of the first attempt, what it's actually like. Now whether I've adapted to it because I'm used to a DCT and it means I've adapted quicker, I don't know. It could be it's not a real alien feeling to me, but it kind of feels like, you know, you got the best of both worlds on this bike. If you're wedded to riding a manual bike, fine, you're never going to change. But if you're interested in, you know, what this is like, I'd definitely say go and give one a go. The only odd thing is that you don't have that clutch. You can either ride it just as you would do with a quick shifter, so you've still got those exact inputs and it feels exactly the same as a standard 1300GS, or you can click it into the drive mode and just let it do it itself, and it does a good job of it. There is a bit of hesitancy, there is a bit of clonk. Some of that might be down to the shaft drive. It's definitely not as smooth an experience as the Honda, but it's not horrible. But you know, yeah, first to second I think is where it's the most clonky. But you know, you've got to say that this is BMW's first attempt at this. I say attempt, obviously there've been years of development, but you know, the Honda system has been developed over the last 20 odd years, and each year it gets improved, and I can see the same thing happening with this. There's not really any learning curve. You just have to forget about that clutch. So 50 miles an hour in third gear. There you go, into second. The downshifts are smoother than the upshifts. Downshifts with that little auto blip work. The upshifts, I'm still getting that. But yeah, first impressions, very, very good. Let's just have a quick look at slow speed manoeuvring. So I'm in drive mode. I'm just going to do a little U-turn here. Just holding on to second there, which is unusual. There we go. Dropped it down into first. Now we're in first. Let's just do another little turn. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, nice soft throttle, not jerky. Yeah, all good.
I've now had the opportunity to get plenty of miles on this bike. So what have I found about the system? Overall, the ASA system I think works well. The gear changes in D mode are a little bit clunky and there's that little bit of hesitance in them, but overall it's a good riding experience. In manual mode, as I mentioned, it's just like a standard GS with a quick shifter, and the actual shift is smoother. Out on the road you adapt to the ASA system very quickly, and I think this is good for those moving from a standard bike. It's going to make that transition very easy. I think most new owners will start in the manual mode because that's the closest to the standard bike, but over time they are just going to migrate to using the D mode as a matter of course. Throughout this video I've obviously made comparisons to the Honda DCT system. That's because that's a system that I know very well. So let's actually boil down some of the differences and the pros and cons for each. The DCT system does give a much smoother shift, hands down. There are times when you barely notice the shift other than the change in the engine note. There's more options also. You have the same manual and drive modes as the ASA, but there's also 3 sport modes with differing levels of shift activation. But on the flip side, because Honda use a dual clutch system, it is physically bigger and it adds 9 kilograms of weight to the bike. And also, if you want to use a foot shifter as opposed to the hand trigger controls, you have to pay extra for it. Talking of foot shifting, it's the BMW that I think wins on this. This has a much more natural feel. There's a little bit of resistance in the pedal. When you're operating this, it feels very much like operating a standard gearbox. Whereas the DCT, if you have the optional foot shifter, it's just an on and off switch. There's no resistance in the pedal. You just push it and it clicks a switch and it changes gear. So it's not quite as nice as that. Having said that though, the Honda obviously has paddle shifts on the handlebars and the ASA doesn't. Now, I could argue the toss between those two systems all day long, but the important thing really is the riding experience, and I don't think the ASA takes anything away from this fantastic machine. It won't be for everyone, but that's fine. At the end of the day, it's about enjoying your riding, and if you enjoy the benefits that the ASA system or the DCT system for that matter bring, and you enjoy your bike more and you ride it more, that can only be a good thing. I do intend to do a full review of this bike, although having said that, there is tons and tons of content out there on this bike already, so I'm not entirely sure what I can add. But if you've got any particular information that you'd like to know, or there's something that just hasn't been covered in those other videos, then let me know in the comment section down below. And by the same token, if you want to know anything about the ASA or indeed the Honda DCT, ask away. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, take care, ride safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.